you're not really Jewish. That's something that a lot of people have heard in their lives, and it is a pretty controversial statement. And I just wanted to use that provocative statement to introduce today's topic, which is, what are Jewish identities, and how does it really work? Is there even an answer? Before I get into that very complex topic, which we're not going to cover everything today, and we might never be able to. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe, as well as follow me on all the different social media available through the link tree in the description, including Rumble, BitChute, and Odyssey. My Substack newsletter is there, as is my Subscribe Star, if you want to tip me, and you're always welcome to comment below, even if it's a very offensive and objectionable comment. I mean, I take it in stride. Look, a lot of controversies have erupted over the past few months owing to the conflict in Gaza as to what it actually means to be Jewish. And there are a number of very sharp opinions on it that are rooted in certain historical events. For example, there is a group called the Neturei Karta, who are they are religious Jews. They're generally, I'm not sure the roots of the group. Some people have told me that they are kind of descending from the Satmar Hasidic dynasty, but it's not exactly the same. In fact, Satmar is simply a Hasidic group that claims to be against Zionism, but they're not anti-Zionist to the degree that the Neturei Karta are. But they have a statement, the Neturei Karta do, that Zionism is not Judaism. In fact, Zionists are not Jews, and they basically stated that they excommunicate the Jews from the Zionists from the community of Judaism, and they see them as heretics. So that's one example. There's also the example of a statement made by a number of big social media accounts last month during the Christmas season that Jesus of Nazareth was a Muslim, when in fact anyone with half a brain knows that he was Jewish. His followers, at least the Christians at some point started to call him the King of the Jews, and but yet there were people who were saying that he was actually a Muslim because he submitted to Allah in the minds of some Muslims. It's a pretty spurious claim, but the third opinion I wanted to bring up in the context of this is that when you hear about some of these people who are very critical of Israel, to the extent that they're anti-Zionist, or in some cases even beyond that, you have people like Gilad Atzmon, who is a British citizen who was born in Israel. They get called self-hating Jews. So what about all of these different concepts? Is it true that if you're a Zionist, you can't be Jewish, as Neturei Karta says? Is it true that Jesus of Nazareth was a Muslim because he was obeying certain precepts of Islam according to Islamic opinions? And is it true that if you criticize and dislike the state of Israel and are an anti-Zionist, that you are a self-hating Jew, or even that you are not Jewish? I would take the opinion that is the most legalistic. If you are born to a Jewish mother, according to the Jewish legal rulings, okay, this is called halakha in Hebrew. Yes, you are Jewish. Also, there's a conversion process for people who are not Jewish. So those are the ways that you can be Jewish. Obviously, there are some questionable situations that have arisen, and issues of whether a conversion is legally recognized, and it's a messy situation. But I would say that all those statements are kind of invalid. The people who are, I'm not blanket discrediting every single thing that they've said, but no, I think a lot of Zionists or there are a lot of Jewish Zionists, and they are Jewish, and also that Jesus of Nazareth was not Muslim. He was, in fact, a Jew his entire life. Now, of course, he wasn't exactly a Jew who was in good standing with the religious establishment of his time, but that's a different matter. And in fact, he lived in a time when there was great contention over what was the true path of Judaism, as even Christian scholars know. People who look into the historicity of Jesus, they know that there were a number of sects that were active during his time. There were the Sadducees, there were the Pharisees, who were the ones who judged him and delivered their death verdict to Pontius Pilate. And there were the Essenes, who were more of an ascetic sect, who some believe were the group that Jesus derived his beliefs from. And then there were other ones like the Zealots, who were nationalist, ultra-nationalists, so to speak. All of them were Jewish. Unfortunately, they couldn't get along. That's one of the tragedies of the late Second Temple period of Judaism. But then the third topic, self-hating Jews. Look, some of those people are obviously self-hating. Gilad Atzmon, for example, openly says that he's a self-hating Jew. But there's also other people, I think, that it's not the matter of them being self-hating. It's a matter of them proclaiming their allegiance to other beliefs, other systems of thought, and that they use their Judaism as they basically sacrifice their Judaism on the altar of their new belief system or their acquired belief system, whatever you want to say. So I would certainly say Norman Finkelstein is one of these. He's a person who he's converted to a new religion. He remains Jewish in terms of legalistic terms, but he has basically killed he's killed his own beliefs in his mind. I don't talk about issues of the soul because it's not really something I have any expertise in. But in his mind, no, his Judaism has basically been subsumed into serving this new purpose of, at one point he considered himself a Maoist. I don't know what he considers himself today. Not that I really care. But yeah, people like him, people like Aaron Matei, Noam Chomsky, there's a lot, and all those Jews who supported Jeremy Corbyn. This isn't to say that I think you have to be a supporter of Zionism. There are good critiques of Zionism. There are issues with the state of Israel today, and there are issues with the Zionist movement and a lot of the practices that they did, and how, and even in my own family, there were issues in terms of the education that came about as a result of Zionism and the groups that were in power in Israel. My mom actually grew up in a kibbutz, and she was basically, after she was adopted, she lived her early years with her family, and the kibbutz system sought to purge the Jewish religious practice out of her, because it was part of the Hashomer HaTzair movement, which means the young guard. These were people who believed in radical socialism and wanted to expunge the Jewish beliefs from the people who lived in their kibbutzes, which are communal farms. So I have a lot of criticism for that, and I am not a Zionist believer, not even religious Zionism. I believe in the self-determination of the Jewish people, and I believe that Israel should be a homeland for the Jewish people, if nothing else because it already exists, and to disestablish it would cause more destruction than it would be to simply reform it in certain ways. So I don't know if that really counts as Zionism. I think that Israeli society is more given to reform and improvement than Palestinian society. And I've actually been reading, I'm not reading it continuously, but The Palestinian Identity by Rashid Khalidi, who is the professor of Arab Studies at Columbia University and generally considered the highest authority today in Arab studies and particularly Palestinian studies. He was the director, I believe, of the senior editor or editor-in-chief, I think is the title of the Journal of Palestine Studies. And his insights into Palestinian identity are interesting. I don't have to necessarily agree with a lot of his statements on the conflict, but here there's a big difference, okay, between the Jewish identity and Muslim identity and Arab identity. But Muslim identity is clearly a religious identity. You don't necessarily have to be Arab to be Muslim. You could be Indonesian, you could be Malaysian, or whatever. So being a Muslim has nothing to do with your national identity. It could have to do, however, with your devotion to a certain cause. Many Muslims believe that they are more, that they should be more committed to a Muslim ummah. An ummah means a nation. In fact, it's the same word in Hebrew, ummah and ummah. They're probably from the same root word. However, Arabs could be of multiple religions. They could be Muslim, they could be Christian, they could be Druze, they could be, there's other belief systems within the Arab world that they derive from societies that were conquered during the early Muslim conquests. So I was actually reading a tweet by a person. He happens to be a pro-Israel Muslim Syrian and an Arab, and he was saying that in Syria there's a group called the Assyrians. They speak a language called Syriac internally, and they've been dissatisfied for many years because the name of Syria, the official name, is the Syrian Arab Republic. So it is specifically tied to the Arab identity and often to Islamic themes within that, and not necessarily to the other religions. For example, the Assyrians in Syria are they tend to be Christian. I don't know if any of them belong to other religions. And the Arabic language is the recognized language of Syria, and that is to the exclusion of other ethnicities there, such as the Kurds and of course the Assyrians, and there's a few other ones. So this issue where people talk about how other societies are inclusive whereas Jewish societies are exclusive, it's not a picture that's true to fact. It's very much more complicated than that. That brings me to the issue of chosenness. So there's a big issue with Jewish identity where some people resent the Jews for thinking of themselves as superior to others, and this is chauvinism within Judaism. And so one thing that I always question is when people say, "Oh, you Jews, you believe you're better than other people. You can do to other people what you couldn't do to your own people." That's a system of thought that I find to be very troubling to me. Now, are there Jewish chauvinists or supremacists? And what does that mean? There are people out there who believe that Judaism, being the true religion, and the Jewish people, the people who were born into and are raised in that religion, they have rights that are above the rights of other people. But that's not necessarily the view of everyone. There's a problem in Judaism that people don't realize, which is different, for example, from Catholicism, where you have really clear religious authority in many cases from the top, from the Pope or from cardinals. The problem in Judaism is that there are different shittas, or shitot. A shitta is a system of belief, and just like there is the shita of the Neturei Karta, which holds that Zionists are not Jewish, there are also shittas that believe that that there is a superiority. But there's also shittas. There are systems of belief that hold that this does not mean what you're talking about. I actually have a rabbi who I discussed with him a while back, and he said, no, being chosen doesn't mean you're better than someone else, but you do have greater obligations and a greater, you have a greater need to spirituality, and without fulfilling the commandments in the Torah, in the Bible, the Hebrew Bible, which is the 5 books of Moses, and as well as the books of the prophets and the writings that came after them, the Old Testament, as well as the legal books that came after that, the Talmud, the Babylonian Talmud, and some of the commentaries. Without learning it and without trying to practice it, and at least attempting to do it, a Jewish life is unfulfilled, and that's what being chosen is about. That you have to actually seek to do God's will, whereas another person, let's say you are irreligious, you don't have any religion, maybe you were born into one. In Judaism, we don't hold those same people to the same standard. Now they are required to do 7 commandments, which I can never remember, which are the 7 Noahide laws, which are fairly simple ones, such as believing in God and not engaging in cruelty to animals, for example, by dismembering an animal while eating it alive. Those are like the pillars of what Judaism believes that the non-Jews, the Gentiles, as one would say, or the Goyim, as people call them. That's just the word for nations in Hebrew. It doesn't mean anything derogatory, although people can say it derogatorily. I'm not going to deny that there are chauvinistic attitudes within Jewish communities. I'm not a disingenuous person, but the word Goyim doesn't mean that you are inferior to anyone. It means that you are from a different you're a different nation, and you have different obligations. So if you fulfill the obligations to God, you have salvation. It's one of the big unique things about Judaism, at least so far as I know. There is no other religion that holds that you don't have to believe in it in order to attain salvation and go to heaven. So there have been many non-Jewish people who have become practitioners of Noahidism, and they don't believe in, they believe in Judaism in a more abstract sense, but they're not. They haven't converted to Judaism. But anyway, let's get back to the main topic. What about this Jewish identity, and how does it come to bear? Like, let's talk about my own personal experience. I grew up here in the U.S., and culturally, I would say that even though my parents were both Israeli, I had very little affinity to Israeli culture. And in fact, I never really liked the music. I never liked the videotapes that I would see that came from Israel. I was always more attracted to American culture, American music, bands, sports. I grew up watching baseball. I generally wasn't somebody who was more attracted to the cultural aspects of Judaism. Then when I turned 18, I did end up moving to Israel, so as an immigrant, so to speak. Although technically I already had citizenship, and because of my Israeli parents, let me make that clear. So I ended up living there for about 5 years, and I absorbed some of the Israeli culture, but really, as my time was winding up there. Okay, so I wasn't really advancing in life anyway, and I had to come back because of an illness in my family. Culturally, I was feeling alienated. I was like, well, I've lived here for 5 years, and the connections I'm making here aren't necessarily solid. I'm sort of living a more aimless life right now. Living single, I don't really have friends that I generally have close relationships with, and I had family there, but I kind of couldn't relate to a lot of their mindsets. It doesn't mean that I didn't like them, but I was feeling more like an American. And even though I could speak the language and I could pass as an Israeli, I still would listen to Oasis. In fact, I would say that, I've been thinking about this, if there's any culture that seems the closest to what I feel a connection to besides the American culture, it would be British culture, sometimes Irish culture, but not Israeli culture, not Jewish culture. Not, I don't speak Yiddish. I don't have any desire to speak Yiddish. I do speak Hebrew, but it isn't because I have some sort of love for the Hebrew language. In fact, there's other languages out there that I find to be more interesting and more expressive to me. Even I tried sometimes to learn Arabic. That's a very interesting language, being that half of my family is from Iraq. So it's one of those reasons that Zionism doesn't really resonate with me. Now, Judaism does, but it's because of the issues of belief, practice, and looking through scripture and things like that. Those are things that I find to be interesting, and that's why I think long term Zionism is really not the point. It's unless it serves as a vehicle to connect to the roots, to Judaism, and you don't need Zionism to do that. So this notion that you have to be Zionist to be Jewish is, in my opinion, bunk. But what I will say is that there's an element of Zionism that I think is true to Judaism. It's not intrinsic only to Zionism. It's really something that is derived from Judaism. It is that in order to actually be a believing Jew, somebody who is true to the roots of it, and not one of these new denominations that has arisen out of Enlightenment Germany, like Reform Judaism or the Jewish Renewal Movement, which was formed, I think, in the late 60s and early 70s here in the U.S., or Reconstructionism, or any of these other, and some of these more secular Jewish circles. It is really a bedrock element of Judaism, of the belief system of being a Jew, to believe that the land of Israel belongs to the Jewish people. Even the Neturei Karta, as extreme as their views are on Zionists, would have to, if you really press them, say, well, really, the homeland of the Jewish people is in Eretz Israel, the land of Israel. It's not in Moscow, where many Jews lived for many years. It's not in Warsaw. It's not in Berlin. It's not in, you can go down the list. It's not in Morocco. It's not in Denver. It's not in Brooklyn. It's in Israel. So Zionism might be wrong about a lot of things, but it is certainly not wrong about something that is very simple, which is that Jewish beliefs, as a definition, are that the homeland, the place where Jews originated as a people, is in Israel. Even there was this ridiculous argument that was going on earlier. I derive a lot of topics on this podcast from Twitter. There was a woman who tried to argue ridiculously that because Abraham, the patriarch, was from Iraq, that really Judaism is not rooted in the land of Israel, that the land of Israel belonged to the Canaanites. But that's not really the truth. There's a process in the Bible, and for one thing, I don't think she really believed in the Bible. She was just using this as a rhetorical point because this is a person who is an anti-Zionist and doesn't believe in the legitimacy of any Jewish heritage in the land of Israel. She believes it's simply a Palestinian land, and the Jews don't belong there at all. The issue is that in the Bible, the Jews became a people thanks to the patriarch Jacob. Where did that happen? It happened at Bethel, which is, it was Bethel, which is in Samaria, in Israel. It's actually in the West Bank today. These are religious points that are hard to refute, and the only way that you can refute them is by saying, I don't believe in this. This is not, I don't believe in Scripture. We shouldn't do policy based on Scripture, and that's it. But to do that, let me make this clear. If people are saying, I don't believe in Scripture, and therefore I reject this notion that the Jews have any connection to Israel, that does strike against their ability to claim that they are really true to Judaism. Because if you reject Scripture, what is Jewish identity? That's another very core topic that I'm talking about. There are people who are out there who are, especially on the anti-Zionist left and within anti-Zionist circles of Judaism, that believe that really the Jews of the diaspora, that's their Judaism, and that they should embrace their roots in America, or they should embrace their roots in whatever country that they come from, but stay away from Palestine. Palestine belongs to someone else. So in order to do that, I think that they do have to go through this sacrificing of the beliefs of Judaism. So again, the Jewish people became a thing through the dream of Jacob at Bethel. If you don't believe that it happened, then you don't believe it happened. And if people want to say that they don't believe in it, then they don't believe in it. And if they want to say they don't believe in the Bible, then that's it. But then what is Judaism if not looking into the roots of the Jews in the Bible? In my opinion, if people believe that Judaism is to walk on 2nd Avenue in Manhattan or somewhere else on the Upper East Side and have a knish and you'll listen to some Yiddish play on your iPod or something, or go to some Yiddish theater and talk about stuff using words like kibbutz, that's not really a heritage. That's a very superficial way of looking at your lineage and your people. It's the same as some of these people who think that being Irish is to get completely wasted on St. Patrick's Day. There's a lot of, being an Irish person. Let's say you went to Ireland and you're one of these people who says, yeah, I'm Irish, I'm from Boston, and all you had to talk about was the Bruins and how you get completely bombed on St. Patrick's Day. I'm sure a lot of the Irish would come up to you and say, look, we're glad that you came back here and you're reconnecting to your roots, but you're kind of making a joke of us. It's a caricature. And that's the problem with the Judaism of diaspora societies. Okay, and I'm not disparaging it. Look, for many, many centuries, Jews had to live in the diaspora. They had to live in Greece or in Turkey or in Poland or in Russia. And when I meet people who grew up, especially in the Soviet Union, and they had to discover their Judaism vicariously through other means, they had to get literature smuggled in, they had to, I respect it, and I respect their Russian culture and their experience. I think the truth is that you can be a person who was born into another culture like Russia or like the United States and still be true to Judaism. But that's not that's not something that is intrinsic to being Jewish any more than it is intrinsic to being Welsh or something. Like if somebody is Welsh American today, how many people really connect to their Welsh heritage? Or my previous example, being Irish. Do most Irish Americans have a consciousnness of the Gaelic language? Do they know how to play hurling, or can they do? And look, I'm not going to get into other tropes of Irish heritage because I don't really know that many Irish people in my own personal life, and people have the right to connect as much as they want to, but reducing Judaism out of a hatred of Zionism, out of political animosity toward Zionism, to some sort of affinity to Yiddish plays or some of the cuisine, or to Manischewitz wine, or any of those things. I think that is actually pretty absurd and ridiculous. There was also a few years back. I'm going to try to wrap this up, but I have a few minutes left. A before I get to the store where I'm going to. A few years back, there was this attempt to separate a group out called Jews of Color. It was made by people who were racial activists within Jewish communities who felt that people who were Jews of color, meaning Sephardic Jews or converts or people from mixed marriages, such as Black Americans or Hispanics, they felt that they don't get enough regard within Jewish circles, and they wanted to start organizations, and there would be militant organizations to agitate for greater representation and greater identity, racial identity, and they called it Jews of Colors, JOCs, just like there's women of color and people of color and all of that. And I was very much against that, even though I would technically count as a Jew of color. My mom was Iraqi, my dad's Ukrainian or Polish, whatever, he sort of thinks of it as Polish, but the part of Poland that he was supposedly from, that his parents were from, is in the Ukraine today. So I usually say Ukraine. The truth of the matter is that we shouldn't be dividing people by color, and I don't try to think of it that way in my professional life either. It would be, first of all, I work in a building. To think of it, for 40 hours a week, I might be the only Jew on the campus where I work. So I don't believe that being parochial about things and not having like common experiences with other people is the right way. If somebody's not Jewish, I talk to them just like if they were Jewish. Now, I'm not going to bring up themes that are like irrelevant to them, but for example, there's a worker who I work with who is a coworker who is a big Cowboys fan. So am I. So we had a terrible week because the Cowboys choked hard against Green Bay. I have other friends at work that I talk to about music or about TV or about car issues or about maintaining my house. There are many ways that people can connect that have nothing to do with their religious beliefs, their racial or ethnic heritage, and that's the real attitude that I try to bring. I think people have to be humble in order to represent their heritage to the world, because if you go and profess your heritage as something that that differentiates you from somebody, that actually makes you into a wedge, and that's not, I believe, the intent of the Bible. God revealed himself to the world in the hopes that humanity could reach the potential that he had for it, and it's very mysterious sometimes, and often I get disillusioned because I see all the suffering in the world, I see all of the terrible things that happen to people. When I think about people who are chauvinistic in their Judaism, or chauvinistic in their Christianity, or chauvinistic in their Islamic beliefs, I sometimes ask, like, what's the point? That's one of the reasons that I'm very much pro-life, because I don't care if you are Christian or Hindu or Buddhist or atheist or whatever. I think that human life, when it's created, does have an intrinsic right to live. It's a secular belief. I think that if we want to create a more humane society, we have to give basic rights to humans at their most basic level. When I see, for example, that there's signs out there that say abortion is a Jewish value, it really makes me want to puke. And I think that those people are the ones who they drive a wedge into the community. And unfortunately, yes, there are situations where I say, I don't care if these people are Jewish. I don't really want to belong to the same group as them. There was a period when Mayim Bialik was making the rounds as this big activist for Jewish identity and Jewish observance. And I believe that Mayim Bialik happens to be a big feminist and a pro-abortion supporter. And I specifically remember telling someone at the time that I don't want to be involved in anything that Mayim Bialik does, because I believe abortion is immoral. It has nothing to do, and it has something to do with Judaism, but even if I wasn't Jewish, I wouldn't believe in abortion. But the truth of the matter is that even irrespective of her beliefs, which I think are wrong, she's just as Jewish as I am, or as anyone in the audience might be. It's people's opinions don't determine what heritage they come from. But anyway, to close, I will say this. This battle right now going on between the Zionists and the anti-Zionists and whatever, people want to put it in very stark black and white terms. Even Netanyahu himself, who I think is just, sometimes he just makes me sick, but not necessarily for the same reasons as other people. He's always been using these terms of this war between the children of light and the children of darkness. I don't believe in that at all. I think that there are certain interests that are out there that you can't reconcile. The Palestinian cause is not one that can be satisfied simply by negotiating with it. And on the other hand, if I was a Palestinian, I would look at the Jewish, or I guess the Zionist cause, whatever you want to call it, and I'd say, how can we live alongside these people sometimes? Maybe we have to displace them in order to be able to succeed. However, a great leader, a leader who would really be able to end this, would have to be able to bridge that gap. They would have to be able to show an area where both of them can work together and hammer out an agreement. That leader has never existed. And that's one of the reasons I think, yes, Zionism, it doesn't mean that you're contradicting real Judaism. In fact, there are kernels of true Judaism within Zionism that can't be denied. However, a lot of these solutions that people are proposing, such as, that there should be a one-state solution where Jews and Arabs live in the same state and there's a right of return, or whatever. A lot of these solutions would not really solve the problem, because it's all good in theory. The Zionism was good in theory. Also, a lot of these Arab states were good in theory, right? People were hoping Pan-Arabism would create this massive superpower, right? This was back in the 50s. The president of Egypt, Gamal Abdel Nasser, wanted to unite the whole Arab world. It was great on paper. It turned out to be a terrible idea in practice, because people didn't want to be ruled from Cairo if they lived in Damascus. To be a great leader, you have to bring about things that are both practical and also fair, and that are able to be enforced. And when we deal with these issues of identity, how does a leader bridge that? Okay, I can't. There hasn't been a leader in the Jewish world who can, reconcile all the different identities of Judaism. Now, there have been people who have tried, and there's people, for example, people talk about the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and this has been in the news a lot because of the whole tunnel thing, which deserves its own video, and there's a lot of videos out there, and if you want to watch those, go ahead. But he wanted to bridge a lot of these barriers between Jews of very different attitudes, and that was his life's work, and I think he did a lot of work to accomplish that. But it's a task that I don't think can ever be finished. It has to be done by people in their own lives. You have to reach out to people and be open to them, and not shut the door to them. And there's a lot of door shutting today, thanks to this whole conflict, where people are putting their politics, and they're wearing their politics like a badge and forcing other people to take sides on literally every issue. Anyway, that's enough for today. There's a lot of unanswered questions, I'm sure, and remarks, and people that have their own perspectives, and maybe you disagree with me. So I encourage you to put those in the comments, and as usual, please find me on all the different social media and video hosting sites that are available through the link tree in the description, including Rumble, BitChute, and Odyssey. My Substack newsletter is there, as is my Subscribe Star if you want to tip me, and have a great day.